Alrighty, recently played. Gonna give you my honest thoughts, feelings, and opinions on Bad Mode by Hikaru Utada. Let's get into it. So, if you've ever, gotten into Japanese music, or at least tried to get into Japanese music, one of the first names that you'll come across is Hikaru Utada. And, I'm talking about actually getting into music that the average person in Japan listens to beyond, the gimmicky stuff that makes it overseas. There's nothing really wrong with baby metal or Kyari Pamu Pamu or something like that. But, when I'm talking about a household name that most people in Japan would recognize, look no further than Hikaru Utada, because they are one of the most successful modern Japanese vocalists of all time. And, I gotta say that Hikaru Utada's latest album, Bad Mode, is really beautiful. I think it's very intimate, it's very honest. I think Utada makes himself very vulnerable. And, I think at its core, this is an album about fantasy and desire and kind of entering this new chapter of your life and the responsibility that comes along with that. I think a big part of this album is those bad habits, those fantasies that got Utada to where they are now and why they can no longer indulge in them. These are the bad habits, or as Utada would say, the bad mode. And fittingly enough, I think that the album's title track displays this quite well. The first half of the song is this kind of city pop sounding fantasy where Utada sings about a date night where they would take some sleeping pills, watch Netflix, and order some Uber Eats. And, I'm not one to judge. That sounds like a lovely time. But when you have a child, when you have responsibilities, you can't be doing that anymore. And I think the second half of the song really is quite brilliant in how it transitions, and Utada starts singing about coping with heartbreak very honestly and how they can't let go of those feelings, and says that they've been working on growing and maturing, and as ready as they might feel for another relationship, they are legitimately scared of how it might end up like the last one, and they'll have to go through all of that heartbreak all over again. All they can do is just pray that it doesn't turn out like last time, and I think this is so perfectly simplified with the line, "Hope I don't f*** it up again." I think that's so simple but relatable and powerful. And as is with the first and second half of the song Bad Mode, I think that tension between reality and fantasy is very constant throughout this album. And we get, some songs dedicated to either that fantasy or desire, or, reality and growing and, accepting the responsibility of that new chapter in your life. Some examples of this on the album Closer, Somewhere Near Marseilles. They fantasize about a steamy European fling. Or my favorite example of the fantasy and desire theme on this album, Dare ni mo iwanai. Utada sings about wanting to get back together with their ex-partner, and that longing to be together again with somebody that you physically connected with countless times before. I think it's that feeling is quite beautifully captured in that song. It's not shown as this scandalous affair, but rather as this really emotional fantasy. That, physical and emotional longing that is the result of a sudden withdrawal of something that you've become so accustomed to. But this is just a fantasy because this cannot happen in reality. They cannot let this actually happen. On Find Love, Utada tells us that they can't get into casual relationships anymore because they're just way too affectionate and get way too deeply attached too fast. And, this is a song about being real with yourself and, accepting that maybe you're not really ready for another serious relationship, and maybe that you do need to work on yourself a little bit. And I really do like how this song captures being committed to self-improvement and therapy and becoming mentally stronger, having faith in your routine, recognizing that good habits are hard to keep up, but it will be worth it in the end. You know, self-improvement takes time. It's not something that can be rushed. Just as a side note, I really do like how in the song Hikaru Utada gives a shout out to their therapist, who I assume is named Vicky. You know, you got to be doing some great work if Hikaru Utada is going to give you a shout out in their track, because, you know, Hikaru Utada doesn't just give a shout out to anybody. And, you know, on top of all of the really beautiful themes and storytelling in this album, I think that sonically, this is a very explorative and boundary-pushing pop album. And, you know, it's very exciting. And I really do love it when, you know, artists that are very acclaimed or in a relatively later stage in their career find new ways to reinvent themselves and keep things fresh and exciting, and that's exactly what this album does. You got Floating Points, you got Nariaki Obukuro, you got A.G. Cook, you got Skrillex for one track. This is a production dream team. Everybody is killing it. This is a great collaboration, and you know, all of these artists individually I'm definitely a fan of, and I think have been putting out great work lately. And you know, it's kind of crazy to hear them all come together on a Hikaru Utada album of all things. You know, it's super random, but I think it's great. I'm all for it. And yeah, I think this is just an awesome collaborative album. I think Utada really gives them the freedom to just do what they do best, experiment, and just go for it, you know? Like, the Radiohead-esque production on Kimi ni Muchuu, track 2, is so cool, and the way that Floating Points builds tension and creates space on the album closer, Somewhere Near Marseilles, it sounds totally unrestricted. Like, that would be a totally awesome Floating Points song on its own, and you know, it's only more awesome as a Hikaru Utada song. Now, usually I wouldn't approve of a Skrillex produced track on an album with tracks that are not produced by Skrillex, but Face My Fears actually works quite well in context in this album, even if it is a little shocking if you're not really prepared for it. But yeah, for real, I think that Face My Fears is this kind of really nice high pointer, you know, high energy moment towards the end of the album. I think it's quite nice. So if I had to pick something that, you know, I didn't really think worked on this album, I would say that initially I kind of felt like there was this disconnect between Utada's vocals that sound rather mature and refined and the edgy and modern production of this album. You know, moments like the trap hi-hats at the end of Time feel a bit odd and out of place, but I gotta say, over multiple playthroughs, this really bothered me less and less. And I suspect that the main reason behind this is because the vocal performances are just so incredibly good on this album. They really keep me coming back for more because there's just so much to appreciate about them. The way Utada captures sadness on Pink Blood or Kimi ni Muchuu or Not in the Mood is just so beautiful, and I love the flow, I love the vocal phrasing, the melodies, it's just all so wonderful. Line after line, bar after bar, is just a pleasure to listen to, and I can say that this is something that Hikaru Utada does exceptionally well across their discography. In my opinion, their vocals are not those powerhouse pop vocals, but rather they're just so expressive and emotional, and they just kind of melt into the feeling of the track. Yes, this album has that dream team of producers, and I do love the production of this album by itself, but I can say that the vocals are never overshadowed by the production. This is Hikaru Utada we're talking about. I don't hesitate to call them a great vocalist, and they really do carry and own these tracks by themselves. The vocals are always front and center, and they do live up to their reputation and status on this album. You got this awesome creative songwriting and production. You got these beautiful expressive vocals from a legendary vocalist. This one is a winner, guys. Don't sleep on it. 9 out of 10. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on Bad Mode by Hikaru Utada. I think this is a great album, and I really do recommend it. And if you enjoyed my thoughts and ramblings, and you want to hear more of them in the future, it really helps to give me a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. So try it out, see how you feel, and you could unsubscribe, but I'd like it if you didn't do that. See you next time.